So this video is intended to show you how to write to files, read files, general file, input, output. So let's just get started here. So we're going to be talking about text files as opposed to binary files, so human readable files, just something fairly simple. So the first thing we're going to do is create a file object. Call it fn equals new file, and we're going to create the name of the file. I'm just going to call it hello.txt. And I'm getting the red squiggly line. The red squiggly line is saying that it can't find the class file. That's because we have to import the IO library in order to use it. So .io, and we should see a file. There it is. So now I'm able to see file. I got rid of the red squiggly line. So we're creating a file object from our IO library. And so all file is doing is giving us, it's not going to create a file. We have to use a different class for that. But it is just giving us a file object that we can, in this case, what I'd like to do is I'm going to type system.out.println, and I just want to know if that file exists in the current directory I'm sitting in. In other words, I'm sitting in, let's see, give you an example here. It's coming. So here's my file explorer. I'm sitting in this Java examples price application directory. There is no hello text file. And so if I run this the first time, or run it this time, it should tell me false. It should print out false because one doesn't exist, which is true. That's exactly what came out. Okay, so all file is doing is giving us, and we can change the directories and so forth, but we're just going to keep it simple for now. So in the current directory that I'm running this application from, is there a file named hello.txt? We have an object to a file object, okay? So now we can get a Boolean true or false. All right, now in order to write to a file or to create a file, we're going to have to use the Printwriter object, or the Printwriter class. And I'm going to write new Printwriter. And you can either put in the name of the file, so here I could put in hello text, or I can put in a file, which we've already created a file object called fn. All right, so red squiggly lines, let's see what we've got. So it can't find the class Printwriter. Well, turns out that import java.io is part of the IO Printwriter, there it is, part of the Printwriter library. Well, I already have import Java, so I could either do it there, or we're just going to put in an asterisk so I can catch both of them. Super. Okay, so now I've got that part of the squiggly line, but now there's a red squiggly line here. Okay, so let's look at what this error message says. It's saying unreported exception, file not found exception, must be caught or declared to be thrown. Wow. Okay, let me show you what that means in English. So up to now, we've been dealing with runtime exceptions, and in runtime exceptions, there's actually two types of exceptions that you don't have to write try catches for. You don't have to catch them and do anything with them. It can go right to the console, to the JVM, which will write the exception to the console, and we've been dealing with those. One of those is runtime exceptions, and a lot of things that we have been dealing with are children of runtime exceptions, and so we just can let the JVM print it out in the console, and that's not a problem. The other type of exception that is the same situation is the error exceptions. And these exceptions are things like where you can't really recover from it in code anyway. So if you have your machine runs out of memory, for example, or if there's some kind of system problem, those would be this error exception. So any error exceptions or runtime exceptions that are encountered do not have to have a try catch. You don't have to catch those exceptions. Now we're going to be working with the IO exception. When we're writing files or reading from files, that's the I/O classes, the I/O library, they can potentially throw up an exception that we're going to have to catch. In order to compile, we have to catch this exception. And so there's two ways to do it. One is we can write a try catch in the code that we are trying to open the file from. So anytime you're required to catch an error that is thrown by a method that we're calling, then we can either catch it in the code that we're writing or throw it to whoever called us. If we're from the main, if we're writing a method in the main and we want to throw it to the method that called us, well, that's going to go to the JVM. If we're in another class that we called from the main, so maybe we're in the main, we call a class that opens a file, that file throws in we don't want this class to deal with that exception, we can throw that exception back to the main. So we've already seen an example of throwing exceptions in one of our past videos. So let's continue on with the example we were just working on and see how we're going to throw that exception, how we're going to deal with this I/O exception. All right, so now we understand that since we're using a I/O exception, that this is not a runtime exception, we are required to catch or throw the file not found exception, which means that I have to either write a try catch and catch that file not found exception here in this method, or I can throw it to the JVM, which means it would put up an error message in the console. So for simplicity, or just for another example, we've thrown exceptions from method to our main in another video. So now let's just throw this one, EXCEP. Let's just throw this one from the main to the JVM. Can you do that? Sure, it'll work. Okay, maybe it's not going to work ideally because it would bring my program to a halt, and in real time I wouldn't want to do that. But for this example, it's okay. Okay, so now I don't have any more squiggly lines. I have an object, that's a file, and now I'm creating a Printwriter object that's going to give me the ability to write and read from this file. So let's go ahead and write to that file. PW. So now we've done a lot of things with print, printline, printf with our scanner object. We can do the same thing with our Printwriter object. So I can just do a print line, and I'm going to type in hello world, because you know that's always what we need to do to start with. So now what I'm doing is I'm writing to this hello text file. If the file already exists the way we have it set up now, if the file already exists, it's just going to overwrite the file that's already there. So this is not code that's smart enough to say add to the existing code. It's simply saying create a file called hello.txt in the current working directory, the current directory that I'm running this application from, and write this text to that file. So let's go ahead and run this and see how that works. So the first time we're going to get this false because hello text did not exist. But now if I run this again, true, so it did write the file to that directory. And in fact, if I pull up that file in that directory, so here's the working directory. We just saw a second ago that there wasn't any file. Hello text is there. And now if I double click on it, oh, we missed our word. So we've not done something quite right there. We should have hello world printed out here. So let's see what we did wrong. So why didn't it print to my file? Well, here's why. When we've done scanners in the past, sometimes we've seen this little error message, or this little, not error message, but a little yellow light bulb saying you need to close your resource. And we have sort of ignored it with the scanner because it's not as important. But when we're using the Printwriter, we have to do the close. And what close does is close the stream and writes the information to the file. So unless we do the close, that hello world won't be printed to the file. So now let's run it. We should get true, that's correct. And now when we look at this file and we look at hello text, there it is. So you have to make sure you close the resource in order for that stream to write and close itself And so now we have seen ways that we can create a file object. We know that that just creates an object of a file that we can verify if it's in the directory or not. We need to create a Printwriter object in order to actually read and write to a file. We can read and write to it the same way we read and write to the scanner object to our console, but we have to make sure we close that Printwriter object in the end in order for us to actually write that data to the file that's being created.